Second deep thought. The different kinds of music production. So, on one end of the spectrum of producer is extremely hands-on. Mm-hmm. And the other is extremely hands-off.
Sure.
David Geffen comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Almost an executive producer is the extremely hands-off kind. And then, so I'm too tired to name drop. George Martin, he had done the Beatles,
mm-hmm.
extremely hands-on, did lots of orchestration, lots of arranging.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have guys like Brian Eno, who basically are artists, and then they bring in a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what hip-hop is. Because hip-hop producers, they'll make a beat, which is the complete musical bed that's just waiting for a vocal. And there's an art to it, because you gotta figure out how to make that sound good while still leaving room for the vocals, because a really good hip hop beat's gonna sound pretty sparse until you put the vocals
mm-hmm.
on. And so that's in a lot of ways that's where a lot of the independent rappers fall apart, is that they wind up buying these beats that are extremely convoluted and lots of stuff in the mid-range and very busy, and then they go to add to it, and there's not a lot of room left for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've had the backlash with like trap, where they basically just have nothing. It's just as sparse as can be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and to me, it's somewhere in between is where the magic happens. But it's
Sure.
really hard to hear the finished product before it's finished, unless you're one of the guys who are able to do that.
Yeah, and you are.
Unfortunately.
I'm very much not. You know, I'll hear your... I don't even know what to call that. The rough harmonies you did.
Oh, the mock-ups.
The mock-ups, yeah, and I'll just sit there and go, okay, that's just painful to listen to, and I have no idea what you're trying to do with it. So,
And then I do my work.
and you finish it, and you show me the finished product, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's my very special talent.
It really is.
If I was a pony, what would my cutie mark be? That's right, I'm making an MLP reference.
You are.
Because, there is a Rainbow Dash. There's a couple of them.
There are a couple of them. I thought you had more than that, though.
I think I gave one away, maybe? No. I think there's 3 of them up there.
Okay.
I like Rainbow Dash. So, I like the concept of Milo, the Friendship is Magic. If you haven't seen it, it's well written.
Yes.
You just have to get past the fact that it's for little girls. So it's very...
There's a lot of pink.
There's a lot of pink. But the characters are excellent, very well written.
Yes.
And the storylines move at a very, not all over the place like some kids' shows could be.
Yeah.
And not at a snail's pace like, Downton Abbey. I love Downton Abbey, by the way. But yeah, so that's generally your different kinds of production, right? You take there's a lot of guys in the middle, like your Lanois and Eric Serafin, who was on the show. He wrote a book called Zen and the Art of Production. He's very much in the middle. His whole thing is about building vibe and getting the artist comfortable, which is
very important.
It's a thing. You came down and you're like, why is there a stuffed animal on the floor? Don't ask. Don't judge.
No, I was just curious as to why you pulled it out.
It was appropriate for the session. So we needed a stuffed animal, so I pulled out a stuffed animal. So there's a lot of things to consider about it, but you ultimately have to decide, if you're doing hip-hop, you're really becoming a composer, and you need to find a way to make that sound attractive without a voice, even though the full result is what's supposed to sound attractive. So, Rot's a Ruck, I just don't know what to tell you. I like working with bands. The reason I like working with bands is if they're coachable, you can get some spectacular results.
Oh, yeah.
If they're not coachable, it's not going to work. That was a lesson that took me about 5 years to learn.
Yeah, no, there was one band that shall remain
It's
nameless.
been a couple.
Well, there's one in particular that shall remain nameless, mainly because I can't actually remember their name.
Was this before the house or after the house?
I think this was before the house. We'd heard them at a Battle of the Bands.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when I heard them live, I wasn't impressed. I was like, yeah, okay, another band doing Battle of the Bands. They're not that great, blah, blah, blah. Don was enamored.
Yeah, it was good.
Loved them. I was not hearing what he was hearing.
Yeah, there was potential.
He recorded, a couple tracks with them?
3. That's all I could stand. They were hard to work.
Yeah.
My problem has always been I have a vision, and I will make it sound spectacular.
It did. It sounded freaking amazing.
Right.
I was absolutely astounded you got them to sound like that.
But you have to basically trust me to make it sound spectacular. And it may not be what you originally envisioned, right? But that's why I do the record label now, because it's like I do have to have some control.
Yeah.
Because that turned into just a constant argument.
Yeah.
It was always, oh, I don't like that drum fill. Well, get out of my face, right? Like, get off my lawn, right? That's how it starts. So...
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've always found amazing about your production work is that you can turn a band that literally nobody else at that particular gig was paying attention to.
Sure.
And make them sound like Pink Floyd.
Yep.
It was absolutely astounding. It's like, and if an artist can get over themselves enough to trust Don, to let Don do his thing, then they will sound better than they ever imagined they could.
Yep.
But, when you're dealing with artist egos, that's also a thing.
But so I found through that experience, right, because I'm very hands-on, I start really nitpicking some minor things that, to me, are polishing up the edges of it, right? And yeah, if I'm met with resistance, there's no reason for me to work with that artist.
Right, you're just gonna, you're not gonna waste the energy.
But at the same time, I'm not quite the Motown factory. Right?
Sure.
Not quite. Like, I want the input. I want the feedback. There was no telling Berry Gordy, oh, I didn't like the way my record came out. No. The record came out, period. Right? So I like the impact. I like the discussion, but ultimately somebody's going to make decisions. And the decisions have to be mine, and then the results are great. But yeah, unless you have the ability to see it see it complete before it's complete, yeah, you just have to be along for the ride and cool. So that's my advice as a producer. I would say 80% of producing is having an opinion. You have to have that's the hardest part is saying, how do I make this better? What can I do to improve this? And also, that opinion could be, this is perfect, don't change a thing.
Yeah.
And I go, and Sounds in Between, that was basically what it was. Except for Ever Tried, Ever Failed. I did some arranging on the end of that one.
Yeah. But that was like one line.
Right.
And
I try to, when everything's going to come together quickly, I try to stay the heck out of the way. If it's going to come to a screeching, grinding halt, it's going to be spectacular.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how it because you can't, once you have to get that deep into the weeds, you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I don't really use MIDI anymore. As I say, in a room full of keyboards and modules, I will finish this Volca album this summer. But I don't really use MIDI in my productions much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For a whole host of reasons, but usually just because it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Just setting everything up and messing with, like, I would rather drag a 90-pound Rhodes from South Austin to my house for a day
Yes.
than get a perfect performance with MIDI and an emulated Rhodes, because the real Rhodes sounds better.
Sure. And, at the same time, you're also not turning these musicians into something they're not.
No,
either.
that's true.
He's not completely changing the sound. He's turning it into the best version it can be.
Yep. I build the house on the foundation.
Yes.
Yep. So if you're thinking about producing, right? If you're interested in the concept of producing music, you just have to remember that the producer's job is to make sure the album gets done.
Yes.
That's the producer's job. Everything else is all an opinion and approach.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find art, if you want to be the kind of producer where you're really into raising funds for artists who can get things done by themselves, and you spend your time raising the budget so that they can go use better and better equipment with better and better engineers,
Mm-hmm.
that's one way of doing it.
It's a valid approach.
Yeah, Rick Rubin, he, for example, rehearses the heck out of his bands before he goes into the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Some producers have kind of their own studio bands they work with,
Mm-hmm.
usually themselves. That's pretty common these days. Like, I'm playing bass on Millicent's record because somebody has to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And you hear it. It's easier for you to just play it because you hear it rather than...
Try to bring somebody in and teach it to them.
Yeah.
But I can't do that with every part.
No.
That's what I got Peters for. Plays drums and trumpet way better than I do.
But he hears it too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's ultimately, that's your job as producers, to make sure the album is finished and comes out. Finished.
Mm-hmm.
Finished. All that matters is output, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're dealing with an artist that needs a lot of personal attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's what working with Alanis Morissette was like. That's why they cut it at, what's his name's house, right? Granted, and that's kind of how I work too. I work into the house, but those records tend to take a long time to make. It's a lot of attention to detail and things. And yeah, those tend to be bigger budget because it takes more time. So as a producer, your primary concern is, how do I make this come out? So if we only have $300, help. You go, okay, I can hire a studio for $300 for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you have to be able to record it in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Which means before we hire the studio, we have to practice at your house over and over and over until it's perfect. And we just roll in, hit it, and go. Right? That's one way of producing. Otherwise, if you're really good at raising money for upcoming albums,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, go raise the money and hire a local studio and keep a studio open for a while longer.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're getting harder. Those gigs are hard to find. And you'll find that if you're willing to keep a guy in steady work for quite a while, you'll get some spectacular rates.
Mm-hmm.
When as a freelancer, among the freelancers will tell you it's only about 30% of your available time that you'll ever work.
Mm-hmm.
The other 70% of that needs to be spent acquiring the next work. You're constantly hunting for the gigs, and then 3 times out of 10, you get to actually do the gig.
Right.
So yeah, guys that are doing that are extremely happy to stay consistently busy,
Mm-hmm.
especially if the hours aren't super long, and it pays the bills and covers everything. You can totally get some good rates. So if you're good at raising funds, that's one way to do it. Or if you're like me and you have a whole room, get to it. Find the vocalist, find the rapper. But I think selling beats is a bad idea. I don't think the market's that good for it. I think it's really hard to sell a beat that's going to work with a vocal and also sell, because the ones that leave no space will jump out to the ear of the guy who's buying the beat. And maybe a few guys understand that you got to find the ones that are a little more sparse, but maybe not. The market's weird.
Yeah.
But I will say this: if you're gonna try to be a music producer, you better learn how to play an instrument of some kind. Very few music producers can't play anything. Rick Rubin was a singer.
Was he?
Yeah, he was the singer for Flipper.
Okay.
So you should, but to me, I think every producer should know their way around a keyboard and a guitar. If you make your way around a keyboard and a guitar, the sky's kind of the limit. If you're a horn player, that works too. You know, it's ultimately though it's about connecting a project with a studio with an audience. The audience is the hardest part, but getting a project in a studio connected is the job of the producer. That and making sure it actually gets done. Because too many artists will just lose all the time getting hung up on minor details, and they'll lose the big picture. All right. That's about my thoughts. If you have questions, if you have music production questions, for example, I was out. I almost went around asking. I asked one guy if he had any tips on coaching vocalists, and I didn't get a response, and that's fine. But if you have those kinds of questions, leave them here in the comments. I've made, God, too many records now. I've been working at it a long time, and I've done all sorts of different kinds of records. I've done the electronic stuff, I've done the jazz stuff, I've done the pop rock, adult contemporary, all of it. So leave a comment, ask me what's going on, or tell me about the project you're working on. That's also interesting. All right, what's next? Everybody gets a trophy?
Yep.